Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm non-executive director of SeaLink, and I'm not sure if many of you know anything about SeaLink, so first I'll just go through a few pointers in regards to who SeaLink is and what we do. We're originally a organisation based in South Australia, running ferries to Kangaroo Island, which hopefully you've all heard of. And ultimately, they're a small group of investors in South Australia, and they realised that only in South Australia weren't going to grow, so they approached different places and looked at different businesses throughout Australia. The guys from SeaLink ran into me in a conference in Los Angeles, I think, and ultimately I sold a business I had in Townsville, which was a ferry business, and a reef operation which operates to Magnetic Island, Palm Island, and the Great Barrier Reef, which I'm sure as Queenslanders you all know where that is. Not only did they buy the company, they inherited me as a director for a bonus, no extra cost. Since then, we went through the process of becoming a public listed company, and we listed a few years back, and we listed at $1.10. I think we're sitting at about $4.30, so it's been a successful liquidity event for all original investors. We had a business in New Zealand, which we've since sold. We had a busy year in 2011. We bought Captain Cook Cruises, which I'm sure most people have seen in Sydney when they've been there. And then the other big one, it's interesting, board meetings in Adelaide, we used to talk about how to build scale and build our business, and they were all South Australian directors, and I used to always ask them, so how many opportunities do we have in South Australia? And other than, lots of good red wine, they didn't have a lot to offer. And I'd always say, well, how many opportunities do we have in Queensland? And it was always a lot. So we basically went ahead and bought transit systems, and that's been a good business for us. We picked up South East Queensland business, which runs to North Straddie and Bay Islands. We also, as part of that, picked up the ferries that run to Curtis Island in Gladstone, which is where the gas projects are. So we run up to 80-metre barge and a bunch of ferries over there, taking the workers to and from. We had the business in Townsville, which is they bought from me. And then one we'll go into in a minute is the Kingfisher Bay, which we acquired recently. So SeaLink itself was in the top 300 public listed companies, consistent dividend growth. This is not a sales spiel, but I just thought I'd give you some background on SeaLink and who we are. Geographically diverse, we have just run a contract in Tasmania. We run out of Western Australia. We have ferries in Northern Territory. We have ferries obviously in Sydney. We have a ferry on charter in Melbourne, so I think we operate in all states of Australia now. We have, obviously, anyone who's into branding, we have a lot of brands, and it's a constant discussion point, but our two big ones are SeaLink and Captain Cook Cruises. Long history of growth through acquisition as well as incremental growth in each company. We have a reasonably good management team. We have a very strong group of employees been with the company for a long time, and particularly in South Australia. And obviously, one of the discussion points here is tourism, and as a company we do think that tourism's got a long way to go in Australia. So just a summary, 96 we had 2 boats and as you can see yourself, 70 staff, and we turned over 20 million. 2018, we've got, and the boat numbers actually, we've actually got 2 being launched this week, and we're ordering another 4 or 5, so that jumps around a bit. But 1,600 staff, and so we turn over obviously a lot more now than we used to. Queensland operations, speaking to Queenslanders, you're all aware of where most of these things are. When I talk to people in South Australia, it sometimes gets a bit blurry. They know where Cairns is, and that's about it. So Townsville, we have obviously 80, Gladstone 86, Stradbroke, we have a good number there, and then we have the Bay Island ferries, Fraser Island, and newest acquisition, we have 300 there. That's just a summary of what we do in the different locations if anyone's into logistics. But, a lot of boats, and the interesting thing is the business that runs in Gladstone is one of the more difficult parts of our business, in the sense it's not really tourism, it's an industrial product which we run because it's working for the major oil and gas people. But the others, Townsville's a mixture of tourism and the people who live on Magnetic Island, the people who live on Palm Island. So what we've tried to do historically as a company, and that's even the original business in South Australia, was half people lived on the island, and then over a period of time they built the tourism up. I think originally it was 10% tourism and over 80-90% people on the island. 20 years later it's sort of 10% people live on the island, 80% plus who are visiting the island. So it's the same model that we worked through with Townsville, and the model we're looking at in southeast Queensland. So SeaLink, we'd like to grow incrementally. A lot of the areas in which we operate, someone mentioned before, Australia has some small numbers in a lot of these regional areas, so it's really hard to grow your business that much in small areas. So we obviously look around for acquisitions that suit our business model. And we're growing new products in Sydney, Western Australia, and we're looking at southeast Queensland and how do we basically increase the number of people who go to North Straddie. Anyone who has a place on North Straddie, they keep telling me they don't want any more people over there, but as a business we do want to take more and more people there. And first time I went to North Straddie, I was blown away how beautiful it is, and what an amazing place. So if no one's been there, you should go there. We've got new services in Sydney and Manly, Barangaroo. Sydney is our most competitive market. Very difficult to make money in Sydney. They just presume that tourism's going to turn up in Sydney, so they don't really, as a government, they don't really want to invest in tourism. And it is a pretty cutthroat business. Kingfisher Bay is our most recent acquisition. This is a business came to our attention about 18 months ago. Most people who live in Queensland are aware of the story of Kingfisher. It was basically owned by the Japanese, built by a couple of Queenslanders and in conjunction with the Japanese. We went up there and inspected it, and we were very surprised on the upside of the condition of the resort and their product and their services they run there. We thought they were a very high standard, and that's one of the major drivers for us to buy or acquire that business. The other one is obviously we're interested in acquiring businesses that really can control the market. We've discovered in Sydney it's when you're a bit player and there's a bunch of other people, it's a lowest cost denominator often. So we would like to acquire businesses or be involved with businesses where we have majority of it, and we can also invest back into that business with the understanding that that we'll gain that return if we make that investment. So Kingfisher Bay, again, is one of those signature resorts or businesses that you really, in this day and age, probably be lucky to be able to put together and make work. So that's a rationale behind buying it. We obviously still don't quite know what we're going to do long term other than run it as it is, but there is quite a lot of land attached to that resort and a few other opportunities which we can leverage into some other products. I have the same voice as Queensland tourism sector. I'm not sure how many people in this room are in the tourism sector in Queensland. It's always been predominantly a mum and dad business, particularly up in the Whitsundays, Cairns, southeast Queensland. You've got some bigger operators, and then obviously Gold Coast, which is from our point of view, the marine industry is mostly mum and dads. Queensland tourism sector is interesting. It's been knocked around a bit over the years. Last year we had a great year in tourism. This year it's down about 20%, as is Sydney. Some of that's Chinese. I think the Chinese tourism industry is a bit of a wild ride. It jumps around a bit, but it's an industry which is evolving at a rapid rate. We've gone from groups to individuals in 5 years, and which the Japanese took 20 years. So it's very much a very fast-moving sector of the industry. Interesting point that we've come across, we looked at some businesses in Cairns to acquire, and we went through due diligence and for one reason or another didn't acquire them. But those businesses have been acquired by other corporates, and it's interesting, over the last 3 to 4 years there's been 10 to 15 mid-sized businesses in Cairns who were started or run by the founding people who've sold out to corporates. Not sure where that's going to or whether that's a good or bad thing, but it's, I read a lot in the media about, our generation who are trying to exit businesses, and that area in Cairns is very much a reflection of that, where most of the business owners are in their late 50s, early 60s. They've been looking for exit strategies, but their businesses now are too big for mostly individuals to buy, and so they've had to look at the corporate market. And because the tourism's perceived to be on an up, there have been that corporate uptake, which is good to see the guys have been able to exit those businesses. The other one, the Townsville Regional Economic Activity, CEDA have asked me to put my 2 cents worth in relation to an area which I live, and although most of us who live in regions, we don't think the southeast Queensland ever acknowledges that we live in North Queensland that much, but I'm sure the people in this room are not like that. But Townsville Regional Economic Activity, I'm sure you're all aware, we had an interesting few years with a very, I better not upset him or say anything wrong, I'll get sued, but Clive Palmer and the business up there, which is a major employer in Townsville, went into some sort of administration, and there was about 900 direct jobs lost in that, and the ripple effects through the small subcontractors has been going on for quite a few years, although I do note Clive's trying to reopen it, but I'm not sure how that's going to go. But that actually knocked Townsville around because it is a small economy. It relies on the military, the university, and 3 or 4 large employers and the government services. But it's interesting that if you walk around Townsville's downtown area, you'll find that probably 50% of the old shops are all vacant, and it's a little bit depressing actually, but trying to put your finger on why that is interesting. I think partly it's to do with the changing way people purchase now with online shopping. I think it's to do with the fact that most retail's probably flat or gone down over the last 5 or 6 years due to some of these stuff that's happening. But with the ratchet clauses in their leases, the lease has gone up, so I think a lot of people have walked away from them. So Townsville, our industrial stuff out in the mines and out west with a resurgence in coal is going pretty well. A lot of the industries are very busy, but it's the retail and sort of the quasi-professionals who in Townsville are sort of having a bit of a bang to, are suffering a little bit. Cairns, I'm involved with some stuff in Cairns, and they're down about 20%. Some of their operations are actually down 30% this year on last year. They're not quite sure why. It's just a general softening. They also think some of it's a negative publicity we receive about the Great Barrier Reef, and the fact that you talk to tourists and they think the Great Barrier Reef's dead now. I mean, some of the people who promote a negative image, whether you like it or agree with it or don't, it really hasn't done a lot of the operators who rely on that for their livelihood much good. So, as a state, we really should understand the problems with the reef, but really if you want to oversell it, you're really just damaging, the Whitsundays and the Cairns and some of the other regions who rely on tourism. That's about all I have to say on that, so thank you very much.